I hadn't seen her in 5 years, but the moment I walked into that lodge, it was like no time had passed. Only everything had changed. I wasn't even supposed to be there. My sister had booked the retreat for me, some kind of emotional cleanse after my breakup with Jenna. I told her I'd rather drink whiskey in a dark bar, alone, but somehow she convinced me. You need a reset, she'd said. Go into the woods, breathe, reflect. I wasn't expecting much, just a long weekend in upstate New York, surrounded by strangers, trees, and forced positivity. But then I stepped inside, wiped the rain from my jacket, and saw Helena. She was standing across the room by the fireplace. Her profile soft in the flickering light, hands wrapped around a mug like it was her shield. And in that moment, the air left my lungs. My first thought was that she looked beautiful, older but more real. The second thought was, what the hell is she doing here? We hadn't spoken since we broke up. Ours was the kind of split that left wounds too deep to patch with polite texts or nostalgic late-night calls. I'd left. I had my reasons: career, fear, maybe even pride, but I never expected her to just disappear so completely. And maybe that's why seeing her now in this quiet, pine-scented lodge surrounded by strangers hit so hard. It wasn't just nostalgia, it was grief, longing, maybe even guilt. I told myself I wouldn't approach her. This was my time, my healing. But the truth is, the moment our eyes met, I was already unraveling. She looked up, caught me staring. Her gaze didn't flinch. It was the same deep brown, but something in them had changed. It was a kind of sadness there now. Not fresh, but settled, like she'd learned to live with it. And something else too. Recognition, surprise, maybe even hurt. She didn't smile, but she didn't look away either. That 5-second stare was louder than anything words could have said. She turned first, walked off to join some small circle of other retreaters. I stood, frozen, heartbeat in my throat, wondering what the hell the universe was trying to do to me. The rest of that first day blurred. Introductions, group exercises, awkward meals. But I couldn't stop tracking her. Way she moved, the softness in her voice when she spoke to others. The way her fingers still brushed her necklace when she was nervous. All of it familiar, and still, we didn't speak. We orbited each other in silence. Every time she passed near me, the air shifted. I could feel her like heat on my skin, like gravity. That night, I stayed out by the fire pit long after everyone else had gone to bed. I told myself I was thinking. The truth was, I was just hoping she'd come outside. She didn't. The next morning, we ended up in the same hiking group. It was early, the trail slick with dew. She wore a navy jacket and had her hair up in a messy knot. Kept trying not to look, but it was impossible. We didn't talk. Just followed the trail 5 feet apart. Like that was the closest we could risk without falling into something dangerous. At one point, she slowed down to tie her boot, and I almost stopped to say something, anything, but the words caught in my throat. I kept walking. She caught up a few minutes later and never looked at me once. After lunch, I wandered toward the lake. I needed air, space. I found her sitting alone on a bench facing the water, arms crossed, head tilted up to the Assis sky like she was trying to memorize the clouds. She heard me approach and didn't turn around. "You still drink red wine?" I said, my voice low, unsure. She looked over her shoulder, her expression unreadable. "Aye. And you still watch too closely." I laughed, a small, hollow sound. "Can't help it." She turned fully then, and for a long beat we just stared at each other. Something passed between us, heavy old. "Still alive. I didn't think I'd see you again," she said. "Me neither." She scooted over, made room on the bench. I sat beside her, our shoulders barely touching. The lake was quiet, reflecting. The cloudy sky in still ripples. She didn't speak for a while, neither did I. "I missed you," she said finally. It hit me like a wave. I didn't realize how much I needed to hear that until I did. I looked at her, really looked. Her eyes weren't sad now. They were open, vulnerable, brave. "You could have called," I said. "So could you?" she whispered. I didn't say anything after that. There was nothing I could add. She was right. We both had a million chances. We'd let them all go. But there we were again together, alone, hearts bruised, but still beating in time. And in that moment, watching the soft wind stir the water, I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit. I never stopped loving her. I just stopped believing we could find our way back. Maybe this weekend wasn't about healing from Jenna at all. Maybe it was about finally facing the ghost I'd never really left behind. Asterisk, the second night changed everything. I didn't plan for it, didn't even expect it, not really. But deep down, I think I wanted it the moment I saw her again. Alina had a way of looking at me that always melted the edges off whatever guard I had up. That night after dinner, most people retreated to their rooms or disappeared into their books and phones. A light drizzle tapped the windows. The fire in the lodge was dying down, and I stepped out onto the porch just to breathe. And there she was, already there, sitting on the bench. Sweater sleeves pulled down past her fingers, hood up like she was trying to shrink into herself. I paused in the doorway. Part of me thought about turning around, but she glanced up and patted the empty spot next to her. Just once. That was all it took. I sat beside her, and for a few minutes, neither of us said anything. We just listened to the rain tap the roof and the wind move through the trees. I don't remember what broke the silence first. Maybe a sigh. Maybe a small laugh at nothing, but suddenly we were talking. Really talking. About nothing and everything. About how the world felt heavier than it used to. About how we'd both spent so long pretending we were okay. And somehow we ended up laughing, like old times. The sound of it startled me. It was the first time in a long while that the laugh felt real, not forced, not polite, just real. At some point she shivered a little and hugged her arms around herself. I instinctively reached for her, wrapping my arm around her shoulders. She leaned in without hesitation. It felt so natural, so easy. It's like her body still remembered the shape of mine, like no time had passed. I rested my chin lightly on her head. She smelled like lavender and rain. "You always did this?" she murmured. Protected me, then ran away. Her voice wasn't angry. It was soft, honest. I closed my eyes. That wound again. That old truth that still burned. I was scared. I said quietly. I didn't know how to stay. I didn't trust myself not to ruin it. She didn't respond right away. "Then, are you still scared?" I thought about that. Really thought. "Not of staying," I finally said. "Not anymore." She pulled back just enough to look at me. Her eyes locked on mine, full of questions. Full of fire. "I shouldn't want this," she whispered. "But you do," I said. And I knew I did too. I had never stopped. The space between us closed like gravity. The first kiss wasn't slow or hesitant. It was urgent. Her mouth met mine with hunger, with years of buried emotion and frustration and craving. My hand tangled in her hair. Her arms pulled me closer, tighter. I couldn't breathe and didn't want to. We stumbled backward into the lodge, barely, making it past the threshold before our lips found each other again. Her fingers unbuttoned my shirt in jerky, desperate motions. I lifted her sweater over her head and kissed every inch of exposed skin. She tasted like wine and want and something. Sweet I couldn't name. We found the couch dim light from the fireplace dancing across her skin. There was no awkwardness, no nerves. Just memory and instinct and heat. She pressed her mouth to my neck, my collarbone, the center of my chest. Her hands moved over me like she was mapping something she'd lost. When I finally slid inside her, we both gasped, our foreheads touching, eyes closed. It was slow at first, tender until it wasn't. Until we were tangled in sheets and breathless. Until the sound of our bodies was louder than the storm outside. I'd forgotten what it was like to feel that deeply. To lose yourself in someone, and not be afraid of what you'd find there. We collapsed in a tangle of limbs and soft moans, bodies slick with sweat, the afterglow thick and golden. She curled into me, her fingers tracing small circles on my chest. We didn't speak for a long time. There was no need to. Then, in the softest voice, she said, "I never stopped loving you." 'Twas like she cracked my ribs open with those 6 words. I didn't know what to say. I felt the same. God, I felt the same. But some stupid part of me, some coward part, was afraid to speak it, to make it real. So instead, I kissed the top of her head and held her tighter. I told myself that was enough. That she'd feel it in the way I touched her, in the way I didn't let go. But deep down, even then, I knew silence can be its own betrayal. Because not saying I love you when someone needs to hear it, that is a choice. And choices have consequences. We fell asleep like that, her head on my chest, my arm around her waist. I should have been happy, should have felt whole again. But some part of me was already bracing for the fall. For the moment when reality would crawl back in and remind us that no matter how sweet the night feels, the morning always asks for clarity. Still, in that moment, I let myself believe. I let myself hope that maybe this time, maybe we were finally going to get it right. Know it yet, but the cost of that silence would show itself in the daylight. And it would change everything. The morning after felt different. Not tender, not warm, but off. Like waking from a dream that ended too soon. I reached for Alina in the empty space beside me, my hand touching only the indentation of where she'd slept. The blanket was still. Warm. I sat up, rubbed the sleep from my eyes, heart already tugging with unease. Something about the way she'd clung to me last night, the way she'd said she never stopped loving me, it had cracked me open. Hadn't said it back, not out loud, but I'd felt it in every inch of my body. I thought she did too. I got dressed and made my way to the main lodge, expecting to find her by the fire or grabbing coffee from the shared kitchen. She wasn't there. A few of the other retreat guests nodded politely as I walked past, murmuring about the morning yoga session or the meditation hike scheduled for later. I didn't care about any of it. I just wanted to find her. To talk, to say what I didn't last night. I spotted her just past the cabins, half hidden by a row of trees near the clearing that led down to the lake. She had her back to me, phone to her ear, her posture tense. I almost turned around, thinking I should give her privacy, but something made me stay. Maybe it was the way her voice dropped, soft but urgent. Maybe it was the way she sounded like she was trying not to cry. Then I heard it. "I'll be home soon. Tell him I love him." I froze. The words crashed through my chest like ice water. Tell him I love him. The tone in her voice was gentle, maternal. My feet wouldn't move, not forward, not back. I didn't even realize I was holding my breath until she hung up and turned around and saw me. Her eyes widened, guilt flashing across her face so fast it was like a slap. "You weren't supposed to hear that," she said, voice shaking. Stepped closer, not trusting myself to speak right away. "Do you have a kid?" I finally managed, the words barely coming out. She nodded slowly. "Yes, his name is Noah. He's 3. I felt like the wind had been knocked out of me. "A 3-year-old?" I asked, stunned. "You've had a whole life I didn't know about." Her eyes filled with tears, and she reached for me, but I stepped back. "Wait," I said, heart racing. "Is there someone else? A husband?" She hesitated. That pause was everything. "We're separated," she said. "His name is Tyler. It's been over for a while now, but the paperwork isn't done yet." I blinked, trying to keep up. "So, you're still married?" The word tasted like rust in my mouth. "Legally, yes," she admitted. "But emotionally, no, not for a long time." I looked at her, really looked. And for the first time since we saw each other again, I didn't recognize her. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. "Before we saw. For last night." She was crying now, shoulders trembling. "'Cause I didn't come here expecting I didn't think I'd feel anything again. And then you were just there. And it all came rushing back." I turned away, hands in my hair, pacing in the grass. Everything about last night suddenly felt different, twisted. What I thought was a second chance was really something else, a moment stolen from a life she hadn't finished yet. I wanted to scream. I wanted to kiss her again. I didn't know what I wanted. Was it real? I asked, turning to her. What happened between us? She nodded fiercely. Yes, it was the most real thing I've felt in years. I believed her. That made it worse. Then why lie by omission? I said, you should have told me. I had a right to know. She stepped forward again, more desperate now. I was scared I'd lose you before I even got you back. And I couldn't take that again. Her words hit hard. I knew fear like that. I'd lived it too. But still, it wasn't enough. You didn't trust me, I said quietly. Not with the truth. Not with your real life. There was nothing left to say after that. I walked away before I did something I'd regret. She didn't follow me. I spent the rest of the day in a haze, ignoring the group, wandering the trails alone, replaying every word, every touch from the night before, now painted in a new light. She had a child, a husband, not technically ex. And I had been the ghost who walked back into her life, igniting something reckless and real and devastating. But I wasn't blameless either. I hadn't asked enough questions. I let the past write a fantasy in my head. I thought love alone could fix everything. Night, I didn't go back to the lodge. I stayed in the woods until the stars came out, wondering how the hell we'd both managed to get so close and still miss each other so completely. I wanted to hate her. I wanted to forget how her lips felt on mine, how her voice cracked when she said my name. But all I could do was sit with the ache. Because the truth is, part of me understood. Sometimes we lie to protect something too fragile to risk breaking, like a memory or the spark of a maybe. But now the spark was exposed, and we were both standing in the smoke, and there was no pretending anymore. Asterisk. The last day at the retreat was suffocating, thick with the weight of everything unsaid and everything we both desperately wanted to avoid. After the storm of yesterday's revelation, the air between Alina and me wasn't just heavy, it was charged like static before a lightning strike. I tried to tell myself I was prepared to face whatever came next, but deep down, I was terrified. I wanted to believe that maybe we could still find some fragile thread to hold on to, but the truth was far messier. The morning started in silence. We didn't share a bed or a kiss. We barely looked at each other. Instead, we moved through the motions of the retreat like strangers trapped in a shared story neither of us wanted to finish. The group session that morning was about forgiveness of others, of ourselves, and I kept thinking about how much I needed to forgive her, but also how much I needed to forgive myself. Forgive myself for letting my guard down so easily, for believing the fantasy, for thinking love was enough. After the session, I found Alina sitting on the porch, a journal open on her lap, but her eyes staring somewhere beyond the trees. I sat beside her, and for a moment, we just watched the wind ripple through the leaves. Then she spoke, voice barely above a whisper. There's something I have to tell you. Something I've been hiding. My heart sank. I wanted to tell her too. Stop, to not make this worse, but I knew I needed to hear it. Go on, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She took a deep breath. Tyler, he's been coming around. Not just for the paperwork or the kid. He's been pressuring me, saying he wants to try again for Noah's sake, for us. Didn't want to believe him, but... Her voice cracked and she looked down. Last night, before you found me on the phone, he showed up here. My chest tightened. At the retreat. She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. He waited outside the lodge, asking me to come home, saying he'd changed, that he'd be better. I told him no. I told him I was done, but it shook me. It made me question everything. I wanted to reach out to hold her, but I didn't. I was scared that if I did, I'd be the fool again. The man left behind in someone else's life. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, voice low. "'Cause I was afraid of losing you before we even started," she said, her eyes pleading. I wanted to believe this sus could be real. Okay, that maybe we could have a chance at something better. But as she spoke, I realized how fragile our little bubble was, how easily it could burst. And I wondered if it already had. That afternoon, the group had a final closing ceremony around the fire. Everyone shared their stories, their breakthroughs, their plans for moving forward. When it was my turn, I spoke about healing and second chances, about how sometimes love isn't enough, if the truth isn't there. I didn't mention Alina or the secrets between us, but inside, my heart was breaking. When she spoke, her words were quiet but raw about letting go and learning to trust again. I saw the way her hands trembled slightly, and I knew she was fighting a storm inside. After the ceremony, we walked back to the lodge together, the sun setting in fiery streaks across the sky. We paused by the edge of the lake, the water reflecting the colors of dusk like a mirror. She looked at me, her eyes full of pain and hope. "I want you to know something," she said. "I never wanted to hurt you, not ever. But I couldn't be honest, not with myself and not with you." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Neither could I. We stood there in silence, the tension stretching thin between us. Then she took my hands, soft, trembling, and said, "I have to go back to him, for Noah. But this Susit means something. It always will." I wanted to argue, to say that love could fight for more, that we could make it work. But I knew the truth was complicated. Sometimes love means letting go, not holding on tighter. "I understand," I whispered, and for the first time, I meant it. That night, before I left the lodge, I saw her one last time. We sat by the fire pit, wrapped in blankets, the stars blinking quietly overhead. So there was no heat between us now. Urgency, just a quiet tenderness that spoke louder than any words. She rested her head on my shoulder, and I felt the weight of everything we never got to say. Then she kissed my cheek, soft and lingering, and whispered, "Thank you for coming back. For being here," I smiled, though my heart ached. "Thank you for letting me in, even for a moment." We held each other until the fire died down, until the night swallowed us whole. Driving away the next morning, the trees fading behind me, I felt a strange mix of loss and relief. Our story hadn't ended the way I dreamed it would. There was no happily ever after, no promises of forever. But there was something else, a quiet, stubborn hope that maybe one day, when the timing was right, we might find our way back to each other again. And until then, I would carry her with me in every whispered memory, every stolen glance, every ache in my chest. Because some loves don't die, they just wait. And sometimes that's enough.